guidelines, standards, all that kind of stuff for not only AORN guidelines, but also sterile processing guidelines, AMI guidelines, FDA. I have to know all about IFUs and that sort of thing, so I go to all of those meetings. I was at AANS, so I try to learn all of that so you guys can do what you do best, which is taking care of the patients. So please use me as a resource if you need to. And today we're going to talk about the action of retraction, which is a lot of basics, but still a lot of good information. Your workbooks, you have your workbooks. The reason you get 2 CE credits is because I had to spend a lot of time writing information about retraction. But we're going to flip through it pretty quickly and then do some talk about the book, Walter. I don't sell anything, so this is going to be neutral information, but if you want to ask a question, please do, and we can talk about that, and then afterwards we'll talk specifically about the product, the book, Walter. So we have to have objectives. We're going to discuss history of surgical retraction, name 3 types of surgical retraction. We'll do this really quickly. List 4 specific types of handheld retractors, discuss how retraction and open surgery affects patient outcomes, and then talk about something that's very important. What are the ergonomics and the ergonomic stressors associated with retraction? So how many of you do first assist or scrub in here? Okay, so that has a lot to do with ergonomics and retraction. Agree or disagree with that? Hey, did I mention we're going to have a valuable prize? Valuable prize. I've only had 1 cup of coffee, so I need more coffee. So you have to listen. So historically, there's been a lot of retraction over a lot of years, right? How long do you think retraction's been around? As long as people have been needing surgery, which is forever. Okay, you got to have access, exposure, and judgment. The first retraction was in the Stone Age. What did people use? Their hands, antlers, whatever they could find, right? Okay. In the 20th century, retractors were actually developed as instruments. There was rib spreaders. This is just history. We're going to talk about this. In the 70s, a doctor named Mel Greenberg developed the Greenberg retractor for cranial retraction. It was pretty complex. Do you guys have a Greenberg retractor? Mm-hmm. So that was in 76. He had a specific reason that we'll talk about later. Then along came 79, Dr. Bookwalter developed the Bookwalter retractor, which is still in use today. In the 80s, the laparoscopic revolution came along, so we had laparoscopic retractors. So we went from using our hands and antlers to laparoscopic retraction, and now robotic retraction, correct? Okay, continues to develop today. But then again, it's not rocket science. The key to good surgery, good retraction is the key to good surgery. There's a lot of variables, though, in obtaining retraction. This is not all that exciting, but it does have to do with force applied and what we need to see. Pretty simple stuff. Okay. So let's get to the meat of the matter. There's several different types. Okay, we've got your basic open retraction. We've talked about laparoscopic retraction. Do you all do notes surgery, and do you know what that is? Have you heard of notes? Natural orifice surgery? It's a big buzz with the surgeons. Think about it. What's a natural orifice we do surgery in? Nose, mouth, ears. Boo-hoo. Boo-hoo. And the boo-boo. Yeah, so we do a lot of nose surgery. Vaginal hysterectomies are one, right? So they're trying to get more and more minimally invasive, right? So what's less invasive than making a tiny hole? Making no hole at all. So that's a good one, and that's kind of gaining some popularity and some buzz in the surgeon's world, but not so much in our world. We don't really talk about it, do we? But now you can regale your surgeons during the long surgery with that little topic. So the different types of surgery, we've got retraction, handheld retraction, right? Self-retaining, disposable, and laparoscopic. That's the 4 basic types. Okay? Then we have fixed table retraction. So that's fixed is mostly a self-retaining as well. So fixed retraction, table mounted retraction. Remember those? Can you remember them? You don't like my southern accent? I felt like I got really southern there for a minute. I'm sorry. Handheld. Give me an example of handheld. Is it Richardson?
Army, Navy.
Richardson, Army, Navy.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
What's a scoop?
Break.
I thought you.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Running the board and
That's
taking
good.
notes. and-
I thought it was something good. They were gonna, no, somebody else was not gonna have a room.
We're working that way.
Okay, handheld retractors, used in almost every kind. Great. We said Army, Navy, Richardson, Siemens, Ragnells. Easy stuff. Millions of them. We use them all the time, right? Yeah, not rocket science. But what happens with handheld retractors?
Slip.
Ergonomic issues, right? How many of you have held a handheld retractor? You can't move. Somebody's getting mad at you, right? You're dying. So it's a big thing. We have an ergonomic toolkit in the ARN guidelines that specifically address this issue. I've had both my shoulders done, and I believe it's some issues similar to that, right? Sometimes when you're the tall one, when we talked about notes, when you're the tall person on a vaginal hysterectomy, you have to hold the retractor up here. And I'm not that small, and I have to try to squeeze into the space. You know, that's it. Handheld retractors can cause some ergonomic issues. And it's a safety issue, long surgery. Maybe that's not why I had the shoulder surgeries, but it could lead to it. Carpal tunnel. Anybody in here had carpal tunnel? Repetitive motion. Retractors cause a lot of those issues. Okay, so we're at a high risk. And so who is responsible for trying to help each other? We are. So when you notice, if you're a circulator, when you notice that your scrub tech or your first assist is stressing and straining, there's some things that you can do to try to relieve that stress. You can maybe remind them to move a little bit, or different things like that. We all have to protect each other. So ergonomic toolkit number 5 kind of gives you some ideas about that. Self-retaining retractors, a different kind, placed by the surgeon and assistant, and then left alone. What are some examples of a self-retaining retractor? Wheatlander, that's the number 1. Everybody uses that. Okay. What do we have to do though when we use a Wheatlander? You just leave it there alone forever? Have to check it, don't we? Because it can move during surgery and cause patient risk. We've always got to look at both sides. The Wheatlander is the most important DLP valve, not most important, but most common. Even tiny little wire speculums. The correct placement is important, but yet we've got to constantly monitor it so that we don't hurt someone. And speaking of the hoo-hoo, we never think of the proctoscope. Is also a self-retaining. Back to the notes. My job is to give you some thoughts, deep thoughts with Marilyn Burns. So let's move on. It's early in the morning, you gotta do something. So fixed table-mounted retractors, first introduced in the 1940s. So that's a long time ago. Again, we're not dealing with something that's new technology. We're not talking robotics here. I've got to try to make it exciting. So the first one was the Smith retractor. And it was a creepy contraption, okay? But we're trying to talk ergonomics, we're trying to make things better. It was on both sides of the table. You know how in the patient beds you pull up, the patient pulls up on the little swinging triangle? So the Smith retractor was something like that, except the ring kind of dangled down from a thing that went across the bed. And so once you got the patient centered and right, then everything hung down from this big arcing two-sided retraction. So it had very limited use because once you got the patient situated, there was no moving the patient. The retractor was in there, was fixed, but what would happen, how many times have we seen things go south and you had to readjust the patient, or, so it was a little bit dangerous and had very limited use. They had a high rate of failure, and there were some other problems with it, so it wasn't very well received. So enter Dr. John Bookwalter. Has anybody in here met Dr. Bookwalter? Yeah, he's an amazing man. Yeah. We celebrated it, he's 81 now. We celebrated his 80th birthday last year, and he still comes to AORN. He improved that contraption, and he did it. It's a great story. So he did that out of necessity mostly. He was in Harvard Medical School. He has a great story that he loves to tell. His father was a surgeon, his grandfather was a doctor, and he was at Harvard, and he fell in love, as some people do, and all during his time at Harvard, there was many residents, as you know here, because you're in a university setting, to hold the retractors. You didn't really have to look around, you didn't have any, you could just do your surgery and concentrate on your surgery. He tells a story of falling asleep holding a retractor during the night, because that's a job as a resident. And after he married, instead of staying in the metropolitan area, he went to her home, which was in rural Vermont. And he gets called in for an abdominal surgery, and there's just him and the scrub nurse, and two people, and nobody to hold the retractors for him. So he realized immediately that he was going to have to figure something out. So he was the man of that studied, and he decided he was going to make the next great retractor system. And he partnered with Codman, you might not be aware of that name, and decided he was going to have a fixed table-mounted retractor system. It was going to have the two posts, but it was going to be easier to use. And he's not known for modesty, if you've met him. So he had a big, told all his buddies from Harvard that he was coming up with this, had a prototype coming out, and went to pick it up. He was so proud, told everybody they were going to get to use it. And when he picked it up, they had made a mistake. They only had one table post. So he had intended for it to have two. And he'd been so sure that he had the next greatest thing that he decided just to go with the one table post. And it worked. It became what we have today. So, kind of a cool story. I don't know if you've heard him tell it before, but it's a really cool story. So, he calls it an innovation born of necessity, which is because he didn't have any help. So, it's 1979 when it was patented. I told you why rule. And he also had his heroes, his family, and his former supervisor there at Harvard. So it just started a whole wave of new retraction. We totally believe that. But the other thing that he does, if you've ever met him, is he took a lot of input from clinical people, and he's made a lot of improvements to this day based on clinical input. And of course, we still use it today. Dr. Greenberg in '75 did the cranial retraction, and it's very similar. His thoughts were very similar. But he wanted to. And who does neuro in here? Do a lot of neuro. His thing was different. It was also a necessity, but he wanted something that would help reduce the tremor that they get when they're just concentrating so hard, and that is what inspired him. So it was a different inspiration, but still the same thing, and that's what leads to a lot of great inventions. How many times have you seen something come out and you think, I should have done that because we all needed that? It's sort of the same thing for the Greenberg retractor. And he really focused on ergonomics, which is a lot of retraction things that we've talked about as well. And then there are some disposable single-use retractors. Do you guys use any disposable retraction? Which ones do you use?
Lone Stars?
Lone Stars, yeah, that's a very common one. So disposable is often, we're off and on again with disposable, but there's some really nice disposable retractors as well, which is a nice thing too. because that reduces the infection risk and also handles that ergonomics as well. AV repair some vaginal carpal tunnel cases. And then laparoscopic, that's new challenges just because of the way laparoscopic surgery is. And also, believe it or not, with laparoscopic instruments, I don't know how many of you work with laparoscopic instruments and assist in laparoscopic surgery, anybody? There's a lot of studies that using laparoscopic instruments over time is gonna cause some issues with carpal tunnel and also with arm fatigue and future stress on your arms. So there's all kinds of different information there. So this is just the move towards minimally invasive surgery. Also has different stressors ergonomically and also with retraction. But any instruments in laparoscopic surgery, almost every instrument is a retractor. Would you agree or disagree with that statement? Not scissors, of course. And then one of our objectives is to talk about specific surgeries in retraction. And so there's different, you can see there's basic, there's every type of retraction is used in cranial surgery. Skull mounted, soft tissue, table mounted. The same with spinal. So these are just some, the Carlin crank. And there's a Magrina Bookwalter. So I talked about how I did a handheld retractor on a vaginal surgery, but then there's a table mounted as well available there. Connor and Sullivan. I'm trying to go quickly because I know you guys are on a time crunch. CDT, again, you can just go through each specialty and you can see that there is almost every type of retraction is available for every type of specialty. Would you agree or disagree with that? And we have the same ergonomic challenges with each type. Even balloons are considered retraction. But worker safety, I believe, is the most important thing to take away as OR nurses and staff, because these repetitive motions that we use, the awkward posture that we have, is something that we take for granted. Just walking in today, as part of your OR team, we were carrying heavy things, and we do that without thinking. And when you're standing in an awkward position, even with laparoscopic instruments, you're ergonomically challenged. They call it the puppet show sometimes when you're holding two retractors, or again when you're holding those handheld retractors. Sometimes it can be very crazy, or just standing still for a long period of time in the OR. So this has been a quick and dirty action of retraction. But just remember that good retraction is the key to good surgery. If you can't see it, you can't take care of the pathology. And we can go from basic to complex. And just think about retraction as not just something like that you walk by and don't even notice, like some of the other things in the OR, but something that has effects, not just for patient safety, but for your safety as well. Any questions or comments? So quiet. Do you want to win a valuable prize? Okay. So, for the first valuable prize, in what year was the Bookwalter invented?
76.
Somebody raise their hand.
79.
Ellen.
79.
A lot of people said it.
76.
76.
Go home, Andrew. 79.
Who stand up? I don't know how to do this because a lot of people said the right answer, but you said the right answer. How many people stand up if you said 79? I mean, be honest. Stand up if you said it. Some people didn't stand up. Okay, so now we have to have a bake-off. Yeah, stay standing. Okay, who wants to be the first one to answer the bake-off? I mean, I don't know how to do the bake-off.
What is bake-off?
Huh? Okay, so tell me the 5 types of retraction. Who wants to tell me? Okay.
We're gonna table mounted, self-retaining, handheld, laparoscopic,
What?
disposable.
Got it. It's a sign. All the best photographs of Dr. John Buckhauser.
He's shakeably jealous.
Yes. Do we need to do one more?
Yeah.
For another valuable prize, it may be surprisingly similar to the other one.
Yeah.
List. Let me think what the question would be. I want a harder one. Should I have a harder one or an easy one?
Harder,
Hard.
bring it on.
List. I didn't even hold up something. Okay, that's good. List.
Spinal retractor.
Let's have a symbol of spinal retraction. Normally I do, list the types of surgery in which surgical retraction is used today. I hear somebody saying it,
Nope.
Notes, laparoscopic,
Woo!
Hey.
Guess what you get? Thank you, guys. Now should we do a quick, shall we